I never thought a single line could change the way I saw her. But when my friend's mom smiled at me and said, "Don't call me old, call me experienced," something shifted, and I couldn't look at her the same way again. I never expected that afternoon to feel any different from the countless others I'd spent at my friend's house. The place was familiar, almost like a second home. I knew the creak in the front step, the way the hallway smelled faintly of pine cleaner, the quiet hum of the old refrigerator. It was routine. Comfortable. But routines have a way of breaking when you least expect it. I was halfway through a sentence when she walked into the kitchen. My friend's mom. Mrs. Carter. That was the name I'd always thought of her by, a figure of authority, someone who offered us snacks when we were kids, who drove us to soccer games, who seemed untouchable in the way adults often do when you're young. But now, I wasn't a kid anymore. And when she stepped into the sunlight streaming through the window, something in my perspective shifted. She wasn't just my friend's mom. She was a woman. Her hair caught the light in a way I had never noticed before, soft, golden strands framing her face. She wore a simple blouse tucked neatly into jeans, nothing flashy, yet the kind of casual confidence that seemed impossible to fake. She moved with a natural grace, like she had long ago stopped worrying about how others saw her. I must have stared longer than I realized, because she caught me. Her eyes, bright, steady, met mine across the kitchen. Not unkind, not scolding. More like she had noticed something I hadn't meant to reveal. "You're awfully quiet today," she said, her voice carrying a playful lilt. "Cat got your tongue?" I stumbled over some excuse, mumbling something about the weather, about how warm the day was turning out. My words felt clumsy, boyish. She smiled, amused, and that's when I made the mistake. "Well," I said, trying to recover, "you don't look a day over. I mean, you don't look old." Her eyebrow arched, the corners of her mouth tugging upward in a smile that told me she was enjoying this far more than I was. She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms with an easy kind of authority. "Don't call me old," she said, her tone rich with humor but sharpened by just enough seriousness to make me sit up straighter. Then, with a pause that hung deliberately in the air, she added, "Call me experienced." And there it was. The line that changed everything. Her words landed in a way I couldn't shake. Not flirtatious exactly, not inappropriate. But layered, as if she had peeled back a curtain and let me glimpse something rarely shown. My stomach twisted, not in discomfort, but in the sudden awareness that this was no ordinary exchange. I laughed nervously, but my voice came out softer than intended. "Experienced, right. That's a much better word." She tilted her head, studying me, her smile lingering like she knew exactly the effect she'd had. Then, without another word, she poured herself a glass of water and walked past me, her shoulder brushing lightly against mine. A brief touch, nothing deliberate. But enough to send a wave of warmth through me that I couldn't ignore. As she disappeared into the next room, I stood frozen in the kitchen, replaying her words over and over again. Experienced. It wasn't just a correction, it was a declaration. A reminder that she wasn't to be boxed in by age, or dismissed by casual words. She was a woman with a history, with confidence, with something I couldn't quite name yet. And for the first time, I realized I was seeing her differently. Not as someone's mother. Not as a figure from my childhood. But as a person, sharp, radiant, and suddenly impossible to ignore. I didn't know it then, but that single moment would be the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. The days that followed blurred together in that familiar way life often does, but something had changed inside me. Ever since she'd said those words, "Don't call me old, call me experienced," they had lingered in my thoughts like a song I couldn't stop humming. It wasn't just what she said, it was the way she said it, calm, assured, with a flicker of mischief in her smile. I found myself paying attention in ways I never had before. On the surface, nothing was unusual. She was simply there, moving around the house, humming softly as she folded laundry, or asking if we wanted more snacks while my friend and I were half distracted with video games. But behind every ordinary moment, I noticed the details I'd somehow missed for years. Like the way she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear when she laughed. Or the way her perfume, subtle and warm, lingered in the air even after she left the room. Or how, when she leaned down to place a mug of coffee on the table, I could see the faint lines around her eyes, not flaws, but stories etched into her skin, the kind you earn by living fully. One afternoon, my friend had stepped out to take a phone call, leaving me in the kitchen with her. She was rinsing vegetables at the sink, and I was awkwardly pretending to scroll through my phone. But when she turned and asked, "Coffee?" I nodded, grateful for the distraction. She handed me the cup a moment later, her fingers brushing mine as I took it. The touch was nothing, barely a second, but it was enough. My pulse jumped in my throat, and I prayed she couldn't see how stiffly I held the mug. "Thank you," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. She smiled, settling into the chair across from me. "You always say thank you," she mused. "Not many your age bother anymore." I shrugged, suddenly shy. "It's just respectful, I guess." Her gaze lingered, soft yet searching. "Respectful. I like that." The silence between us wasn't heavy, it was warm, steady, like the hum of the refrigerator in the background. I realized I didn't feel like I was talking to my friend's mom. I felt like I was talking to her. She leaned her chin into her hand and asked about my classes, my plans for after graduation. Usually, those kinds of questions made me feel cornered, like adults were trying to measure me. But with her, it felt different. She wasn't testing me, she was listening. Every answer I gave seemed to matter to her, as though she was piecing me together carefully, without judgment. At one point, I cracked a joke about how unprepared I felt for the real world, and she laughed, really laughed. The sound filled the kitchen, rich and unguarded, and for a second, I forgot to breathe. She caught her breath, pressing her hand lightly against her chest as her laughter faded. "Oh, you don't give yourself enough credit. You see more than you realize." Her words struck me. Not because they were especially profound, but because they felt personal. She wasn't just being polite, she meant it. The front door creaked open then, and my friend's voice echoed through the hall. The spell broke instantly. She straightened in her chair, her smile shifting into something more neutral. I quickly sipped my coffee, hoping I didn't look as guilty as I felt. But as my friend walked in, tossing his phone on the counter, I couldn't shake the image of her laughter. Or the way her eyes had lingered just a heartbeat longer than necessary. They were small moments, ordinary, fleeting, but each one carried weight. A brush of fingers, a shared smile, a conversation that felt deeper than it should. And though I told myself not to read too much into it, my heart had already decided otherwise. Something subtle was forming between us. A quiet current running beneath the surface of everyday life. And no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I knew it was pulling me closer. It was late, later than I'd planned to stay. My friend had gone upstairs, leaving me to finish an assignment I'd brought along. The house had grown quiet, the kind of silence that makes every small sound feel louder, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional groan of the old pipes, the ticking clock on the wall. I stretched in my chair, about to pack up, when I noticed a soft glow spilling out from the living room. Curious, I walked over and found her there, his mom, sitting on the couch with a book resting loosely in her hands. She wasn't reading, not really. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the night pressed against the glass. For a moment, I considered leaving her be. But something pulled me in, the same way a quiet melody draws you to lean closer. I cleared my throat gently. "Couldn't sleep?" She looked up, startled at first, then smiled faintly. "No, just one of those nights." She gestured toward the armchair across from her. "Sit if you like. Unless you're heading out." I sat. The living room felt different at night, softer, more intimate. A single lamp in the corner cast a pool of warm light that seemed to shrink the room, drawing us closer. She tucked her legs beneath her, casual, comfortable, yet I couldn't help noticing the way she kept fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. After a pause, she spoke. "You know, sometimes I wonder if people stop really seeing you after a certain age. Like you fade into the background, even when you're standing right in front of them. Her words hung there, delicate but heavy. I leaned forward, caught off guard by the honesty in her tone. I don't think that's true. Not for you. She gave a small, almost disbelieving laugh. You're kind to say that. But kindness and truth aren't always the same thing. Something stirred in me, a quiet defiance. I met her gaze and said, steady this time, no. I mean it. You don't fade. If anything, you stand out. Her eyes softened, a flicker of something unspoken crossing her face. For a heartbeat, neither of us looked away. Then she exhaled, almost a sigh, and looked down at the book in her lap. You remind me of myself when I was younger, she said quietly. Hopeful. Always looking at the world like it was waiting for me. I miss that sometimes. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. You still have that. Maybe you just don't notice it because you're too close to yourself. She tilted her head, considering my words. Then, almost absent-mindedly, she brushed her hair back behind her ear, a gesture so simple it sent my pulse racing. The lamplight caught the faint silver in her strands, and instead of making her look older, it made her look luminous. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel empty. It felt charged, filled with things neither of us dared to say. Finally, she broke it. You're easy to talk to, she admitted. Most people just skim the surface. But you listen. Her voice softened on that last word, and I felt it settle in my chest. I wanted to reach across the small space between us, to take her hand, to reassure her she wasn't invisible. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I let my words do the touching. You deserve to be listened to, I said. By someone who sees all of you. Her lips parted slightly, as if she might respond, but she only nodded. Then she smiled, tired, genuine, with just a trace of gratitude. The clock ticked on. The night wrapped around us like a secret. And as I sat there, watching her in the glow of the lamplight, I realized this wasn't just a conversation. It was a doorway. A quiet opening into something I hadn't dared imagine before. The days after that late-night talk felt different. We didn't speak of it again, but something lingered between us, quiet yet unmistakable. Every time I stepped into that house, I was more aware of her presence, the rhythm of her footsteps upstairs, the faint clink of dishes in the kitchen, even the sound of her laughter drifting from another room. One afternoon, my friend had rushed out to run an errand, leaving me behind to help with a project for class. I sat at the dining table, surrounded by scattered notes, when she appeared at the doorway. Need a hand? She asked lightly, her tone casual. I looked up, trying not to show how my chest tightened at the sight of her. Actually, yeah, if you don't mind. She crossed the room, her steps unhurried, and leaned over the table to glance at my notes. Her perfume reached me first, warm, subtle, with just enough sweetness to draw me in. She pointed at the messy diagram I'd sketched. You've overcomplicated this, she said with a teasing smile. Here, let me. I handed her the pen, our fingers brushing. A spark, small, fleeting, ran through me, and I had to stop myself from reacting. She leaned closer to write, her arm grazing mine, her shoulder nearly touching. The space between us seemed to shrink until I could feel the warmth of her body radiating against me. I tried to focus on the paper, but my eyes betrayed me, catching the curve of her profile, the way her hair slipped over her shoulder, the soft concentration in her expression. My heartbeat thudded loud enough that I was sure she could hear it. There, she said finally, drawing a simple line that connected the pieces. See? Sometimes the answer isn't complicated at all. Her words hung heavier than they should have. I swallowed, suddenly aware of how close we were, how little distance there was between her hand and mine on the table. Guess I needed someone experienced to show me, I said, my voice low before I could stop myself. She froze, just slightly, and turned to look at me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, there was no mask of casualness, no playful deflection. Just silence. A pause that stretched and deepened until the air itself felt charged. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Her breath brushed against my cheek, faint but undeniable. My hand twitched, wanting to cover hers, but I hesitated, caught between desire and restraint. The weight of what we weren't saying pressed down on me, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might close the distance. Instead, she leaned back slowly, her smile returning, but softer this time, tinged with something unspoken. "Careful," she murmured, almost a whisper. "You don't know what you're inviting." Her words left me unsteady, caught between exhilaration and ache. She stood, smoothing the fabric of her blouse, her composure restored. "I should start dinner," she said, as if nothing had happened. And just like that, the moment was gone. But we knew, that something had shifted. That pause, that closeness, the silent current that passed between us, it couldn't be dismissed. It was real, undeniable. As she walked away, I sat frozen at the table, my pulse still racing, my thoughts a tangled storm. I had wanted to touch her hand, to let her know she wasn't alone in whatever she was feeling. But instead, we'd both retreated into safety, leaving the truth suspended between us. And yet, as much as it left me restless, I understood something new. Once a boundary has been tested, it can never be unseen. After that afternoon at the dining table, nothing between us felt the same. We didn't speak of what happened, or almost happened, but the silence carried more weight than words ever could. Every glance, every shared moment, now felt like walking a tightrope. I caught myself thinking about her constantly. The brush of her arm against mine, the way her breath had lingered near my cheek, the quiet intensity in her eyes. It replayed in my mind at night, keeping me awake, caught somewhere between guilt and longing. She was my friend's mom. The thought pressed on me like a warning, a flashing sign I couldn't ignore. I told myself it was wrong to feel this way, that I had to let it go before it became something bigger. And yet, every time I saw her, the resolve slipped. She seemed to feel it too. Where she once lingered in conversations, she now pulled back. If I walked into the kitchen, she busied herself with something, anything, to avoid looking directly at me. If I spoke to her, her answers were polite, even warm, but shorter than before. It should have made things easier, that distance. But instead, it left me restless, unsettled. The absence of her attention felt louder than her presence ever did. One evening, I arrived at the house only to find her in the living room, sorting through old photo albums. She barely looked up when I entered, offering only a polite smile before turning back to the pages. My friend had gone upstairs, leaving us alone, but this time she didn't invite me to sit. I hovered in the doorway, torn between retreating and stepping closer. "You seem busy," I said awkwardly. She flipped a page, her voice calm but distant. "Just keeping myself occupied." Something in her tone stung, though I knew it wasn't meant to. I wanted to bridge the gap, but she was making it clear, too clear, that she was building walls. For the next few days, I mirrored her distance. I kept conversations safe, quick, never daring to linger. But even as we avoided each other, the tension didn't fade. If anything, it grew heavier, filling the space between us with unspoken words neither of us could release. It all came to a head one night when I found myself walking out to the porch for some air. She was already there, sitting alone with a mug of tea, her expression unreadable in the dim glow of the porch light. I hesitated, then joined her. The cool night air carried the faint scent of rain, and the quiet wrapped around us like a fragile truce. "You've been distant," I said finally, my voice lower than I intended. Her fingers tightened around her mug. She didn't look at me right away, but when she did, her eyes were steady, even if her voice wavered. "Because I need to be. You're young. And I'm." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "This isn't something we can allow." Her words cut, even though I understood them. I wanted to argue, to tell her it wasn't that simple. But she wasn't wrong. There were rules, unspoken but powerful, and we were already dancing dangerously close to breaking them. I nodded slowly, forcing out the words I didn't want to say. "I know." For a long moment, we sat in silence, the night pressing in around us. She took a slow sip of her tea, her hands trembling just slightly. And in that subtle shake, in the way she avoided my gaze, I realized something. She was struggling just as much as I was. It didn't make things easier. If anything, it made them harder. Because now I knew this wasn't one-sided. She felt it too. And that truth carried both the thrill of possibility and the ache of impossibility. The night it finally happened, I hadn't planned to stay late. My friend had left with others, promising to be back in a couple of hours, and I was alone in the living room, flipping aimlessly through channels I wasn't really watching. She appeared quietly, like she often did, carrying a folded blanket in her arms. "You'll catch a chill sitting there," she said softly, draping it across the back of the couch. "Thanks," I murmured, watching her move with that effortless grace. For a moment, I thought she would leave again, vanish into another room as she had so many times lately. But instead, she hesitated. Then she lowered herself onto the couch beside me, not too close, but closer than she needed to. We sat in silence, the TV flickering light across the room. My heart hammered, aware of every inch between us, aware of how badly I wanted to close it. Finally, she broke the quiet. Her voice was steady at first, but I caught the tremor beneath it. "I've been trying to convince myself this, whatever it is, isn't real. That it's just in my head. But the truth is," she trailed off, shaking her head, "you make it harder to ignore." I turned toward her, startled by the honesty. Her eyes didn't meet mine right away. Instead, she stared at her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Vulnerability radiated from her, so unlike the calm composure she usually carried. "You're not imagining it," I said quietly. My voice sounded different, rough, certain. "I feel it too. I've tried to push it away, but every time I see you, it comes back stronger." That made her look at me. And in her eyes, I saw both fear and relief. A fragile mixture that made my chest ache. "This can't be simple," she whispered. "You're young." "I'm experienced," I said softly, echoing her own words from that day in the kitchen. Her breath caught, and for a moment, the corners of her mouth twitched into the faintest smile. But it faded as quickly as it came. "People wouldn't understand," she said. "They'd judge. They'd call it wrong." "Maybe they would," I admitted. "But what we feel," I hesitated, choosing carefully, "that isn't wrong. It's real. And I don't care what they call it." Her eyes glistened, and before I could stop myself, I reached for her hand. My fingers brushed hers gently, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, her hand tightened around mine, trembling slightly. The silence stretched, heavy but alive. Her breathing quickened, and she leaned just a fraction closer, as though her body betrayed what her mind was still resisting. "I haven't felt this, seen, in years," she confessed, her voice breaking slightly. "I thought that part of my life was over." I squeezed her hand. "It's not over. Not for you." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for reassurance, for something solid to hold onto in the storm of her emotions. Slowly, almost cautiously, she let her forehead rest against my shoulder. The weight of her there, gentle, trusting, made my heart race and steady all at once. I didn't move beyond that. I didn't dare. I simply let her lean, let her breathe, let her know she wasn't alone. My hand remained over hers, grounding her, grounding me. We stayed that way for what felt like forever, two people suspended in a fragile truth, neither hiding anymore. When she finally lifted her head, her smile was small, but real. "This changes everything." I nodded, my voice low. Maybe it was always meant to. The next day, the world looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Every ordinary detail, the quiet hum of the house, the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of her footsteps on the hardwood floor, carried a new weight. It wasn't just her house anymore. It wasn't just her. It was the place where a line had been crossed, where the truth had finally slipped free between us. We hadn't talked about it yet. Not properly. But the air was different now, charged with an awareness that couldn't be unspoken. That evening, I found her on the porch again, The same place where she'd once told me we couldn't allow this. Only this time, when I slid open the screen door, she didn't look away. Her gaze lifted to mine and stayed there, steady, waiting. I sat down beside her, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. The sun was sinking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. It felt safer that way, to let the silence speak first. Finally, I broke it. So, where does this leave us? Her fingers tightened around her mug. She let out a slow breath, her eyes fixed on the horizon. It leaves us in uncharted waters, she said softly. And that terrifies me. I nodded. Me too. That admission hung between us, oddly comforting. We were both scared. Both unsure. But at least we weren't alone in it. She turned toward me then, her expression vulnerable, stripped of the usual calm she wore like armor. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want you to regret this someday. I shook my head. I don't regret it. Not for a second. The only thing I'd regret is pretending it isn't real. Her eyes softened, and in them, I saw a flicker of relief. She set her mug down carefully, as though freeing her hands freed her heart too. Slowly, she reached over and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. The touch was tender, hesitant, as if testing whether the world would allow it. I leaned into her hand, letting her know it was okay. Her lips curved into a faint smile. You're too young to understand how complicated this could be. Maybe, I said quietly. But I'm old enough to know how rare this feels. She closed her eyes for a moment, as though weighing every consequence, every unspoken fear. And when she opened them again, there was something softer there, acceptance, if not certainty. I can't promise you forever, she admitted. I don't even know what tomorrow looks like for us. But, she hesitated, her voice breaking slightly. I don't want to let go of this, not yet. Relief rushed through me, stronger than I expected. I reached for her hand, this time without hesitation, and she let me hold it. Her fingers intertwined with mine, firm and trembling all at once. We sat like that as the sun slipped lower, painting the sky darker, the first stars appearing overhead. No grand declarations. No reckless promises. Just two people, caught in a moment that was fragile, imperfect, but real. At one point, she leaned her head gently against my shoulder. I pressed a kiss to her temple, the softest brush of lips, and felt her relax into me. The world outside might never understand. Maybe tomorrow we would face questions, doubts, even judgment. But tonight, here on the porch with her hand in mine, none of that mattered. We weren't defining it. We weren't labeling it. We were simply letting it be. Together but uncertain. And somehow, that was enough. 15L